Your son is failing every single class, Mr. Caldwell, the headmaster said carefully, sliding the report card across the polished oak desk. Ethan Caldwell, Billionaire CEO, leaned back with a smirk, tapping his Rolex against the armrest. Don't look at me. He's had the best tutors money can buy. If he's failing, then maybe the janitors around here should try teaching. His eyes flicked to Maya Torres, who had just stepped in with her mop bucket, and the room filled with nervous laughter. Maya straightened slowly, her hands still damp from bleach water. She didn't flinch. She didn't shrink. She simply said, with a calm edge, "I've taught students your money could never reach." The silence that followed cut sharper than his mockery. But Maya said nothing more. Yet, if you've ever seen someone dismissed and then rise in the most unexpected way, you know the reversal is worth waiting for. And that's exactly what's about to happen. Subscribe now, because this story is about what happens when power thinks it owns every answer and then discovers it doesn't. Ethan snorted, shaking his head as though she were a child, interrupting grown-ups. "Keep mopping, sweetheart. Leave the teaching to the professionals." His words dripped with disdain, but Maya's eyes held steady, calm, unshaken, as if she knew something no one else in that room could guess. Beneath the uniform, beneath the calloused hands, lay a history few would believe. Once, she had been at the top of her field. Once, her name carried respect in lecture halls, not just in staff break rooms. But tragedy had a way of breaking even the brightest stars, pushing them into corners the world never bothered to look at again. For Maya, the fight was no longer about titles or respect. It was about her daughter, Sophie. Every morning, she slipped quarters into the bus fare jar and packed peanut butter sandwiches into a second-hand lunchbox. Every night, she read over worksheets by lamplight, determined to give her daughter the education she couldn't afford for herself anymore. Cleaning classrooms was her way of keeping Sophie's dreams alive. And now, this smug billionaire thought he could make her invisible. Where are you watching from? Because whether you're in a small town or a big city, you'll understand what's about to happen. Ethan Caldwell had chosen the wrong woman to humiliate. The meeting ended, but the sting of his words lingered like bleach on her hands. She wheeled her mop bucket back down the corridor, shoulders squared. Staff whispered apologies when she passed, but Maya barely heard them. She had learned long ago not to dwell on cruelty. The real battles weren't fought in boardrooms. They were fought in silence, in survival, in keeping your head high when others tried to force it low. Ryan Caldwell sat slouched outside the principal's office, tie crooked, eyes hollow. His phone buzzed with group chats he ignored. Maya slowed her steps. For a moment, the boy looked like any other teenager, lost, drowning under expectations too heavy for his shoulders. Their eyes met, just for a second. Then he looked away. Back in the custodial closet, Maya pressed her forehead against the cool metal shelving. She had once written curriculum guides, won awards for innovative teaching. Now she scrubbed gum off desks. Yet, as she folded rags and stacked bottles, a thought flickered at the edge of her mind. Maybe fate wasn't finished with her. Maybe this boy's crisis wasn't just his, it was hers too. She remembered her last classroom vividly. The struggling students, the ones no one believed in, had always been her favorites. She had a way of reaching them, of showing them that failure wasn't final. Her daughter was proof of that resilience. And now, Ethan Caldwell's son was circling the same drain, except no amount of Maseratis or private jets could drag him back up. When the bell rang, she saw Ryan again in the lobby, head buried in his arms. Ethan stormed past, waving off the headmaster's reassurances. "Just fix him. I don't care what it costs." He didn't even glance at his son. Maya did. She saw more than grades. She saw a child on the verge of giving up. She tightened her grip on the mop handle. Somewhere deep inside, the teacher she had buried stirred awake. Ethan thought humiliation would silence her. He didn't realize it had just lit the fuse. Maya lingered in the lobby, mop bucket at her side, watching Ryan's slumped shoulders. The boy's silence pressed heavier on her than the bleach smell clinging to her uniform. Ethan was already gone, barking orders into his phone as if his son's crisis were just another line item on a corporate balance sheet. For a moment, the marble floors gleamed too brightly, reflecting wealth and power that had no cure for what she'd just seen. Ryan lifted his head slightly, and in his eyes she caught a flicker she knew too well. The look of a student on the edge of quitting, the hopeless kind. Maya's heart tightened. She had seen that same look on Sophie when her math homework seemed impossible, when the world told her she wasn't enough. The memory stirred something long dormant inside her, something she had tried to bury under long nights of scrubbing and silence. The headmaster approached Ryan gently, murmuring about extra tutoring, about options. Ryan barely responded. His father's money had bought every private tutor in the city, and still the boy had failed. Maya's hands curled around the mop handle. She remembered classrooms where students walked in, believing they were stupid, and walked out knowing they had potential. That was her gift once. And now, she was sweeping up the shards of other people's arrogance, pretending she had no voice. The next morning, Ethan returned to the academy with his son in tow. Ryan trailed behind, tie undone, sneakers dragging. Ethan's suit was immaculate, his cologne sharp, his voice sharpest of all. "Get this fixed," he barked at the headmaster. "I don't care if you have to build a new program around him. My name will not be attached to failure." He didn't even look at Ryan as he spoke. Maya, crouched in the corner wiping down baseboards, felt the sting of his words. Failure. He saw his son as a liability, not a person. She straightened slowly, rag in hand, as Ethan finally glanced her way. "Still here?" he scoffed. "Maybe if you scrub hard enough, some of that effort will rub off on the students." The staff laughed nervously. Maya didn't respond. She'd learned silence could be louder than anger. But Ryan noticed. His eyes flicked between his father's dismissive grin and Maya's steady expression, and something unspoken passed between them. Later that day, in the quiet of an empty classroom, Maya found herself repairing a desk with a loose leg. She pulled a wrench from her cart, tightening the bolts with practiced hands. Ryan slipped in unnoticed, headphones dangling around his neck. He froze when he saw her crouch by the desk. "You know how to fix that?" he asked quietly. Maya nodded. "Everything breaks eventually. The trick is knowing how to put it back together." Ryan sank into a chair, fiddling with the zipper on his hoodie. For a moment, the walls between janitor and student, billionaire's heir and single mother, dissolved. He looked less like a spoiled rich kid and more like a boy desperate for someone to see him. That evening, Ethan stormed out of a meeting with the headmaster, furious. "If he doesn't pass the upcoming exams, I'll pull my funding," he threatened. "I won't bankroll a school that can't handle one student." His voice carried down the hall, echoing off the marble, sharp and cruel. Maya heard every word. So did Ryan. The boy's jaw tightened, his eyes falling to the floor. When Ethan's footsteps faded, Ryan muttered, almost to himself, "I'm just a screw-up." Maya's chest ached. She wanted to tell him he wasn't. She wanted to remind him that failure was not final, that every mind could be unlocked with the right key. But for now, she said only, "You're not broken, Ryan. You just need someone who believes you can learn." His head jerked up, surprise flashing across his face. No tutor had ever said that. Not his father. Not anyone. Just the janitor with bleach stains on her sleeves. For the first time, Ryan didn't look away. That night, as Maya scrubbed the last classroom floor, she couldn't silence the thought echoing in her mind. The boy didn't need more tutors. He needed a teacher. And once, she had been the best. But stepping forward would risk everything. Ethan Caldwell had already humiliated her twice. If she dared to show her hand, the ridicule would be merciless. Still, as she wrung out the mop, Maya felt the stirrings of resolve. She had been invisible long enough. The next day, Ryan lingered in the hallway until she passed. "Hey," he said awkwardly, "what did you mean yesterday?" "About believing I can learn?" Maya met his gaze. The boy looked fragile, like a cracked vase one wrong word could shatter. She steadied her voice. "I meant exactly that. I don't care about your father's money. I care about you. If you're willing to try, so am I." Ryan hesitated, then nodded. And in that nod, Maya saw the door she'd thought was forever closed begin to open again. Her hidden past was no longer just a memory. It was becoming a lifeline. Ryan's nod lingered in Maya's mind long after he walked away. It wasn't just agreement. It was a spark, the kind of fragile spark she'd once spent her career fanning into flame. She finished her shift that night with her heart beating faster than it had in years. For the first time since she'd lost everything, she felt the stirrings of her old self returning. Not just a janitor, but a teacher with purpose. The next morning, Ryan waited near her custodial cart, hands jammed into his hoodie pockets. "Could you show me something?" he asked hesitantly. "Like how you'd teach. Not the way the tutors do it." His voice cracked with uncertainty, but behind it was hunger, real hunger, for someone to treat him as more than a disappointment. Maya studied him carefully. She could feel the invisible eyes of the academy everywhere, ready to laugh if they saw a janitor pretending to teach. But she also knew this boy didn't have time for pride. "All right," she said softly. "Let's start small." They sat at the back of an empty classroom. Ryan pulled out a math worksheet covered in red X's. "I don't get any of this," he muttered. Maya didn't snatch the paper or roll her eyes the way his tutors probably did. Instead, she leaned forward. "Show me what you do understand," she said. Ryan frowned. "Nothing. Everyone understands something," Maya replied gently. "Start anywhere." Slowly, painfully, he stumbled through the first problem. Wrong answer. But as Maya listened, she noticed something. His mistake wasn't stupidity. It was a single step skipped in logic. The kind of gap a stressed mind often makes. She smiled. "You're closer than you think." Watch he worked through the problem alongside him, narrating every step. Ryan's eyes followed her hand like a lifeline. By the end of the page, he had gotten 2 problems right on his own. It wasn't perfect, but it was a beginning. When he looked up, his face carried something new. Relief. "Nobody ever explained it like that," he said quietly. "Sometimes the problem isn't you," Maya answered. "It's the way it's taught." The bell rang, and Ryan hurried off before anyone saw them. Maya returned to her cart, her heart heavy with the risk, but light with the knowledge that she had reached him. That afternoon, Ethan swept into the academy again, trailed by assistants juggling phones and folders. His voice filled the hall, booming over lesser men like a drill sergeant. "Results, headmaster. I want results." His gaze landed on Ryan, who was emerging from class. "Well?" he demanded. "Still failing, aren't you?" Ryan froze, shoulders curling inward. Ethan turned to the staff clustered nearby. "I've paid for the best tutors in this state, and my son's still useless. What does that say about this place?" His words cracked like a whip, meant to sting everyone within reach. Maya stood nearby, wiping down the railings. She saw Ryan's face crumple, saw the weight of that word, useless, pressed down on him. Her mop paused mid-swipe. She wanted to speak, but this wasn't the moment. Not yet. Later, in the cafeteria, Maya spotted Ryan pushing food around his tray. Sophie sat across from her mother, swinging her legs and chattering about her spelling test. Ryan glanced up at the girl, then at Maya. For the first time, he smiled faintly. "You did good today," Maya told Sophie. Ryan looked startled. Nobody praised him for small steps. Nobody noticed. He glanced at Maya again, something wordless flickering in his eyes. Gratitude. That evening, Maya returned to her tiny apartment, exhaustion heavy in her bones. Sophie sprawled on the floor with crayons, drawing a picture of her and her mom under a giant tree. Maya studied her daughter's bright face, the way hope shone in her eyes despite the struggles they carried. That was what she was fighting for. And maybe, just maybe, helping Ryan was part of that fight. The following day, Ryan found her again, this time outside by the maintenance shed. "Can we do more?" he asked, almost urgently. "I've got a test coming up." I don't want to fail again." Maya hesitated. Every step deeper meant greater risk. Ethan would mock her, the staff might scorn her, and her job could vanish. But she couldn't ignore the plea in Ryan's voice. She nodded. "We'll work after classes." No one has to know that secret became their pattern. In quiet corners of the school, they went over problems, assignments, and essays. Ryan stumbled, failed, tried again. And with every small success, his posture straightened a little more. One afternoon, Ryan blurted, "Why are you helping me?" "You don't have to." Maya's eyes softened. "Because once, someone believed in me when nobody else did. And it changed everything." He stared at her, a question forming on his lips. But before he could ask, a sharp voice echoed down the hall. Ethan was approaching, barking into his phone. Ryan stiffened, panic flickering. Maya slipped the paper into her cart and stood like nothing unusual was happening. Ethan barely glanced at her, dismissing her as he always did. But Ryan's gaze lingered on her long after his father's voice had faded. For the first time in years, he felt like maybe he wasn't broken. Maybe someone saw more in him than failure. And Maya, clutching the rag in her hand, realized the tide was shifting. The hidden teacher inside her was no longer silent. She was preparing to step forward, even if the whole world mocked her. Maya's decision to keep teaching Ryan in secret weighed on her like a second job. Each evening, after polishing the last brass doorknob or sweeping the final hallway, she would slip into empty classrooms with Ryan. There, beneath buzzing fluorescent lights, she watched the boy who had been written off as a failure begin to wrestle with problems in ways that showed real grit. His progress wasn't perfect, but it was progress. And Maya knew progress was the seed of transformation. Ryan's eyes carried less despair now. When he solved a problem correctly, his lips twitched into a grin he didn't seem to recognize. "I didn't think I could ever get this," he admitted one night, shaking his head in disbelief. "But it makes sense when you explain it." Maya smiled, though she kept her voice steady. "It always made sense. You just needed someone to meet you where you are." But the risk of discovery hovered constantly over them. Every time footsteps echoed in the hall, Ryan stiffened, shoving his papers aside. Every time a door creaked, Maya's stomach tightened. If Ethan ever found out that his son was learning from a janitor, the consequences would be brutal. Still, the need was too great. Ryan's upcoming exams were a cliff edge, and Ethan's threats to withdraw funding from the academy rang through the halls like thunder. For Maya, It wasn't just about helping Ryan. It was about proving, even quietly, that no child deserved to be discarded as useless. One afternoon, as she emptied trash cans in the staff lounge, she overheard a group of teachers murmuring about Ryan. "Hopeless case," one said with a shrug. "Money can't buy motivation." Another sighed. "The father's impossible. Demands miracles, blames everyone else." Their laughter was tinged with pity, not for Ryan, but for the staff caught in Ethan's storm. Maya tightened her grip on the trash bag. Hopeless. She had seen enough sparks in Ryan to know better. The problem wasn't him. It was the way everyone looked at him, like a burden instead of a boy. That evening, Sophie waited up for her mother with a drawing clutched in her small hands. It showed 3 figures, Sophie, Maya, and another taller figure beside them. "That's Ryan," Sophie explained brightly. "He looks sad, but you're helping him. Just like you helped me." Maya felt her throat tighten. Her daughter saw more than she let on. The next day, during lunch, Maya caught sight of Ethan in the courtyard. He was surrounded by colleagues, gesturing broadly as though the entire world was his audience. His watch gleamed in the sun, his shoes untouched by the dust of the grounds. Across the way, Ryan sat alone on the steps, untouched sandwich beside him. Ethan never glanced his son's way. Maya couldn't help the quiet fury that rose in her chest. Here was a man who measured his worth by power and possessions, yet he couldn't see the treasure crumbling right in front of him. She forced herself to move on, but the image burned in her mind. That evening, Ryan arrived to their study session with an unusual fire in his eyes. "I want to do this," he said firmly, sliding his books onto the desk. "Not for him, for me." "I'm tired of being the joke," Maya nodded, pride stirring. "Then let's get to work." Hours passed as they dissected essays and tackled equations. Ryan stumbled, got frustrated, then tried again. Each time he pushed past failure, Maya saw more of his real potential surface. He wasn't stupid. He was hungry. For belief, for guidance, for something no paycheck could buy. But whispers began to spread. A hall monitor caught sight of them once, raising a brow. A teacher noticed Ryan's sudden improvement on a quiz and muttered about someone helping him. The fragile secret was cracking. When Ethan arrived the following morning, his anger filled the halls again. "My son had better not embarrass me this week," he barked to the headmaster. "If he fails, heads will roll." His voice carried far, and students shrank away. Maya, polishing a trophy case nearby, caught Ryan's expression, tight-lipped, jaw set, fear and defiance colliding in his eyes. Later that afternoon, Ryan cornered her near the maintenance shed. "What if I fail anyway?" he whispered, his voice trembling. "What if he's right about me?" Maya placed a hand on his shoulder, steadying him. "Then you fail, and we try again. Failure isn't the end. It's information. And if you keep fighting, you'll prove him wrong. Not just once, but every time." For the first time, Ryan nodded without hesitation. Something in him had shifted. That night, Maya lay awake long after Sophie had fallen asleep beside her. The risks were growing, the walls of secrecy closing in. But she knew one thing for certain. The boy was learning, and the man who mocked her had no idea who he was truly up against. She wasn't just a janitor. She was a teacher. And soon, Ethan Caldwell would see exactly what that meant. Maya's resolve hardened with every passing day. She could no longer see Ryan as just the billionaire's son. He was a boy clawing for dignity, and she was the only one willing to fight beside him. Still, she knew that every lesson brought them closer to exposure. And Ethan Caldwell's scorn was a storm waiting to break. That Friday evening, as the academy emptied, Ryan showed up to their usual hidden corner with an essay draft in hand. His shoulders hunched nervously, But when Maya read the opening paragraph, her chest tightened with pride. The ideas were raw, the grammar uneven, but the voice was real. "This is your work," she told him, handing the paper back. "Don't ever let anyone tell you otherwise." Ryan flushed, muttering, "Nobody's ever said that before." For a boy raised in mansions and chauffeured cars, the simplest words of belief struck deeper than any luxury ever had. But their fragile progress was about to collide with the arrogance of his father. The following Monday, Ethan stormed into the headmaster's office with Ryan in tow. Maya was polishing doorknobs nearby. Invisible as ever, Ethan's voice cracked through the hallway. "My son is not going to be the academy's failure. I'll double the donation, hire 5 new tutors, whatever it takes. But if this school ruins my family name, I'll bury it in court." Maya's stomach churned. Ethan thought money was a key to every lock. He had no idea that his son's cage wasn't built of tests or grades, but of fear and neglect. When the office door swung open, Ryan slipped out first, face pale. Ethan followed, adjusting his cufflinks like the meeting had been a negotiation won. His gaze landed on Maya. "Still mopping floors?" he sneered. "Don't get any ideas." "This is a world you'll never understand." Maya kept her eyes on the rag in her hand, her silence unshaken. But Ryan, trailing behind, glanced at her with a flash of something. Defiance. Ethan didn't notice, but Maya did. That evening, Ryan asked for another lesson. This time, he wanted to go beyond homework. "How do you stay calm?" he asked suddenly, books spread before them. "When he talks to you like that?" "When he talks to me like that." Maya set down her pen, surprised. She thought of Sophie, of long nights paying bills on pennies, of swallowing humiliation to survive. "Because I know who I am," she said finally. "And he doesn't get to define that." "Neither does anyone else." Ryan stared at her, eyes wide. For the first time, he saw not just a teacher, but a survivor. The next day, whispers began to ripple through the academy. A hall monitor mentioned seeing Ryan with the janitor. A teacher commented on his sudden improvement. The headmaster frowned, but said nothing, wary of Ethan's temper. Still, Maya felt the pressure building. The secret wouldn't hold forever. She considered pulling back, retreating into silence again. But when she looked at Sophie that night, drawing stars on scrap paper and asking if dreams really came true, Maya knew she couldn't stop. She wouldn't. The exams loomed closer. Ryan's nerves cracked through his focus. "What if I freeze?" he admitted one night, chewing his pencil to splinters. Maya leaned forward. "Then you take one breath, remember that you're not broken, and do the next step. One step at a time. That's how you climb mountains." Her words settled into him like anchors. Slowly, he nodded. But Ethan wasn't blind to the shift in his son's posture. At a school event later that week, he barked at Ryan for slouching, for forgetting a line in his presentation. Parents and staff watched the public scolding in uncomfortable silence. Ryan's face burned red, and his voice faltered. Maya was mopping nearby, the sting of humiliation cutting her as sharply as if the words had been directed at her. She wanted to step in, to shield the boy, but she held her ground. She wasn't ready to reveal herself. Not yet. Still, Ethan's arrogance was planting seeds he didn't expect. Each cruel word, each dismissal, drove Ryan closer to the one person who believed in him. And Maya knew the moment of truth was coming. That evening, when Ryan showed up again, he didn't bring homework. He brought a single folded sheet of paper. Inside was a test he had passed, a small one, a quiz, but it was marked with a grade higher than he'd seen in months. His eyes shone as he handed it to her. I did it. I really did it, Maya smiled, pride swelling in her chest. You did, she said softly. And in that quiet triumph, Ryan whispered the truth neither of them could ignore anymore. You're not just a janitor. You're my teacher. Maya's breath caught. The secret was out. Not to the world yet, but to the boy who needed it most. And that was enough to keep going, no matter what storm Ethan tried to unleash. Maya froze at Ryan's words, the paper trembling slightly in her hands. You're my teacher. It wasn't spoken like a compliment. It was spoken like a truth he had discovered, raw and undeniable. For a moment, the weight of it pressed on her chest. She wasn't supposed to be his teacher. She was the woman with bleach-stained sleeves pushing a mop cart down hallways where no one looked twice at her. Yet in Ryan's eyes, she had already stepped into a role she thought she had lost forever. Keep this between us, she whispered, folding the quiz carefully and sliding it back into his hand. Not everyone would understand. Ryan nodded, though his expression carried frustration. Why? Why shouldn't they know? You're the first person who's actually helped me. Because of your father, Maya thought, though she didn't say it. Instead, she placed a hand on his shoulder. Some truths have to wait for their moment. That night, she sat in her apartment long after Sophie had gone to bed, staring at the faint cracks in the ceiling. Memories pressed in. Her name etched on awards, colleagues calling her a rising star. The day it all crumbled when tragedy forced her into survival. She had buried that part of herself to make ends meet. And now, Ethan Caldwell's son was pulling it back into the light. The following week, Ryan's steady improvements began drawing attention. A teacher remarked that his essays had sharpened. Another noted his confidence in class. Ethan, oblivious to the real reason, boasted at a board meeting. Finally, the tutors I'm paying for are showing results. His arrogance earned polite laughter, but Maya felt heat crawl up her neck as she listened from the corner, emptying the trash. Later that day, Ryan found her by the stairwell. He thinks it's the tutors, he muttered bitterly. He's taking credit for something he doesn't even understand. Maya studied his expression, the anger burning under his words. Then let that fuel you, she said quietly. The best revenge isn't shouting the truth. It's proving him wrong in ways he can't ignore. Ryan tilted his head, considering her words. Like passing the exams? Like passing them so well, no one can deny it. Their lessons grew more intense. Maya pushed him harder, drilling him not just in answers, but in how to think, how to stay calm when panic crept in. She reminded him that failure wasn't weakness, but information. Each time he stumbled, she forced him to stand back up, and slowly, he began to believe he could. But secrecy came at a cost. One evening, the headmaster walked in unexpectedly as Maya explained a history passage to Ryan. He paused, brows furrowing at the sight of the janitor leaning over the billionaire's son. "What's going on here?" Ryan panicked, stuffing his notebook into his bag. Maya's mind raced, but she kept her tone steady. "Just making sure the desks are clean, sir." The headmaster's eyes lingered, suspicious, but he said nothing and left. When the door clicked shut, Ryan exhaled shakily. "That was close," Maya nodded, though her pulse was still racing. "This won't stay hidden forever," she admitted. Ryan leaned forward, determination etched into his face. "Then let them see." "I don't care anymore," Maya wanted to caution him, but something in his tone stopped her. For the first time, he sounded like someone ready to fight for himself. Days later, Ethan arrived at the academy in a rage. Ryan had skipped a private tutoring session arranged by one of the city's best-paid instructors. "Useless," Ethan barked in front of the staff, his voice echoing through the hall. "You don't waste a man's money like this." His words cracked like a whip across Ryan's face. Maya was cleaning nearby. She saw the boy flinch, saw his fists clench, and before she could stop herself, she stepped closer. "He's not useless," she said firmly, her voice cutting into the silence. Ethan turned, startled, then sneered when he saw who had spoken. "Stay in your lane," he snapped. "You don't get to speak about my son." Ryan's eyes widened, stunned that someone had defended him at all. For a heartbeat, Maya felt exposed, raw, like a secret had slipped out. She lowered her gaze and moved back, resuming her work in silence. Ethan shook his head, muttering about overstepping staff, and strode away. But the damage was done. Ryan had seen it, seen someone stand up to his father's cruelty without flinching. Later, he caught up with her outside the janitor's closet. "Why did you do that?" he asked quietly. "Because someone had to," Maya replied, her voice calm but firm. Ryan nodded slowly, his throat tight. In that moment, she wasn't just his secret teacher. She was his shield, the first shield he had ever known. That night, Maya returned home and found Sophie asleep at the table, crayons scattered across her notebook. Another drawing waited for her. Maya standing tall, broom in one hand, a book in the other, with Ryan smiling beside her. The image struck deep. Sophie saw her mother's truth before the world did. Maya tucked the drawing away carefully. The secret was cracking wider each day, and soon there would be no turning back. Maya slipped Sophie's drawing into her bag the next morning, carrying it with her like a hidden shield. It reminded her why she kept fighting, why she risked everything in hallways that smelled of polish and disinfectant. She had no illusions left. Sooner or later, the truth would come out. And when it did, she needed to be ready. At the academy, Ryan was waiting for her near the back stairwell, his eyes lit with a nervous energy. "I got another quiz back," he said, holding out the paper. This time, it was nearly perfect, just 2 small mistakes. Pride flickered across his face, awkward and new, as though he didn't quite know how to wear it. Maya examined the paper and smiled. "You earned this," she told him. "Not because I gave you the answers, but because you fought for them." Ryan ducked his head, but his grin betrayed him. "If he ever saw this," he started, then trailed off. "He doesn't need to see it yet," Maya replied carefully. "When the time comes, the results will speak for you." But Ryan's shoulders sagged. "He'll just take the credit. He always does." Maya paused, then chose her words with care. "Results are undeniable. No matter who tries to twist them, the truth shines through." The boy studied her, as if weighing the truth of her promise. Slowly, he nodded. That afternoon, Ethan arrived at the academy again, striding down the halls with his usual entourage. His cologne preceded him, sharp and overwhelming, his words even sharper. "I don't care what excuses the staff have," he barked to the headmaster. "Excellence is the only acceptable outcome. My son has my name, and my name will not be attached to mediocrity." Ryan's face burned as his father's voice echoed. Students glanced his way, whispering. Ethan didn't notice. He never did. Maya, polishing a trophy case nearby, caught Ryan's expression, the tightening jaw, the downward stare. She wanted to tell Ethan to stop, to remind him his son was a child, not a quarterly report. Instead, she remained silent, her steady presence the only anchor Ryan could cling to. Later, in their quiet corner, Ryan burst out. "Why does he do that? Why does he talk about me like I'm just some investment he's losing?" His voice cracked, a mixture of fury and despair. Maya leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Because he doesn't know how to see people. He only knows how to see assets and outcomes. But you're not an asset. You're a person. And no matter what he says, you matter. Ryan swallowed hard, his fists slowly unclenching. For the first time, he whispered, I believe you. The transformation was small, but Maya knew it mattered. Once belief took root, change became unstoppable. The next day, rumors began to swirl louder. A teacher muttered about Ryan's sudden improvement. A classmate swore he saw the janitor, and Ryan bent over the same desk. By the time lunch ended, whispers filled the cafeteria. Is she tutoring him? One student asked. A janitor? Another scoffed. The words buzzed through the air like gnats. Maya felt the weight of those whispers, but she didn't flinch. She had endured worse. What stung wasn't their scorn. It was the fear of what would happen when Ethan inevitably heard. That evening, Ryan walked into their session with a tense jaw. They're talking, he muttered. Everyone knows something's going on. Maya set aside the worksheets. Do you want to stop? She asked gently. Ryan shook his head fiercely. No, I don't care what they say. You're the only one who's ever helped me. I'm not giving that up. Maya's heart swelled with a mix of pride and worry. Then we keep going, she said. They returned to the lessons, pushing through pages of equations and essay drafts. But the tension never fully left. Each echo of footsteps made them pause. Each creak of a door sent their eyes darting. The storm broke sooner than Maya feared. One late afternoon, as Ryan solved a problem under her watchful eye, the door slammed open. Ethan stood there, flanked by the headmaster. His gaze swept over the scene. The billionaire's son bent over a worksheet, the janitor leaning over his shoulder, and his face hardened with rage. What is this? Ethan's voice thundered. You think you can steal from me even my son's education? A janitor? His laugh was sharp, cruel, echoing off the classroom walls. Ryan's face drained of color. Maya straightened slowly, rag still in her hand. She met Ethan's glare without flinching. The headmaster shifted uncomfortably, caught between fear of losing donations and shock at what he was seeing. Mr. Caldwell, I wasn't aware. You'll fire her, Ethan snapped, pointing at Maya like she was dirt under his shoe. Today. She doesn't belong in this building, let alone near my son. Ryan's mouth opened, then closed, panic flickering in his eyes. He wanted to speak, but fear clamped his throat. Maya stood silently, her heart pounding. The moment she had dreaded was here. She wasn't ready to reveal the truth. Not yet. But one thing was certain. Ethan Caldwell had underestimated her, and the reckoning he feared most was already on its way. Maya's pulse thundered in her ears as Ethan's words hung in the air. Fire her! Throw her out! Reduce her to nothing more than a stain on the marble floors he walked across with polished shoes. The headmaster fumbled for words, caught between his loyalty to donations and his shock at the scene before him. I won't have my son polluted by this, Ethan spat, waving his hand as if swatting away an insect. She scrubs toilets, for God's sake. And you're letting her sit here pretending to teach? Ryan's face flushed crimson, shame and fury colliding in his chest. His hands curled into fists on top of the desk, knuckles white. For the first time, he pushed back against the weight of his father's voice. She's the only one who's helped me, he said, voice low but trembling with defiance. Ethan froze, his eyes narrowing. What did you say? Ryan's breath caught, but he didn't back down. The tutors didn't work. Your money didn't work. She did. The room fell into stunned silence. The headmaster's lips parted, but no words came. Ethan's jaw clenched, disbelief etched deep into his expression. You're telling me, he said slowly, voice dropping into a dangerous growl, that a janitor succeeded where my resources failed? Maya met his glare. She could have bowed her head, mumbled an apology, slunk back into the shadows where he thought she belonged. But something inside her refused. "Your son isn't broken," she said calmly. "He just needed to be seen." Ethan's laugh was sharp, filled with contempt. "You think you know anything about my son? About education? About excellence? You clean floors?" Maya straightened her shoulders. Her uniform smelled of disinfectant, her palms rough with work, but her gaze was steady. "I know more than you think." The headmaster stepped in then, trying to defuse the explosion. "Mr. Caldwell, perhaps we should—" "Silence!" Ethan snapped. His fury filled the room like a storm, his voice thundering. "This farce ends now." He turned back to Maya. "Pack your things. You're done here." Ryan shot to his feet, panic rising. "No! If she goes, I fail again. You don't get it. I need her." The plea struck the air like a crack of lightning. For the first time, Ethan's face faltered, a flicker of uncertainty passing over his features. His son had never begged for anything, not tutors, not attention, not affection. Yet here he was, standing for the janitor his father despised. Maya felt the tide shift, subtle but undeniable. She placed a hand lightly on Ryan's desk, anchoring the moment. "This isn't about me," she said softly. "It's about him. You can keep throwing money at the problem, or you can let him prove himself." The headmaster seized on the opening. "Mr. Caldwell, the exams are coming up in just days. Perhaps we wait. Let the results speak before making decisions." Ethan's eyes burned with rage, but the logic was difficult to dismiss. His reputation hinged on those results. Slowly, through clenched teeth, he growled, "Fine. But when he fails, and he will, you'll be gone. Both of you." He stormed out, slamming the door behind him. The headmaster trailed after, sweating, leaving Maya and Ryan in the quiet aftermath. Ryan sank back into his chair, his chest heaving. I thought he'd drag you out right there." Maya crouched in front of him, steadying her voice. "You were brave," she said, "and now we focus. The exams are your chance to show everyone who you are. Not for him, for yourself." Ryan nodded, though his hands still shook. "I'll do it," he whispered. "I don't care what he says anymore." That night, Maya returned home drained, her body aching, but her spirit burning. Sophie was already asleep, her small hand curled around the drawing of Maya as teacher and protector. Maya kissed her daughter's forehead, whispering, "One day, they'll see." Over the next days, lessons became more intense. Ryan stayed later, working until the custodian lights flicked off. He stumbled, cursed under his breath, but pushed harder than ever before. Maya guided him, patient and firm, her own exhaustion drowned by determination. Every mistake was met with encouragement, every success with quiet pride. And slowly, the boy who had once slouched in defeat began to sit taller. His voice grew steadier. His pen scratched with confidence instead of hesitation. Rumors swirled louder now. But Maya no longer cared. The whispers of janitor teacher followed her through the halls. Yet with each step, she felt less ashamed. She was no longer hiding who she was. She was preparing. On the eve of the exams, Ryan looked at her, eyes burning with resolve. "I'm ready," he said. Maya placed her hand over his. "Then prove them wrong." For the first time, Ryan smiled without doubt. And in that smile, Maya knew the turning point had arrived. The morning of the exams arrived heavy with tension. The academy's halls buzzed with whispers, students clutching notes, teachers pacing. For Ryan, it felt like the weight of the world pressed against his shoulders. He had failed too many times before, but this time was different, because Maya's voice echoed in his mind. One step at a time, Failure isn't the end. Maya arrived early, her mop cart squeaking across the polished floors. She didn't head straight to the classrooms. Instead, she paused outside the exam hall, pretending to check the baseboards. Her eyes found Ryan through the doorway, sitting upright, pencil in hand, his face pale but determined. She nodded once when he glanced her way. It was enough. Inside, Ethan Caldwell had secured a front row seat among the parents permitted to observe. His tailored suit gleamed, his expression smug. He had told the headmaster the night before, "If he fails this, I'll expose the incompetence of this entire institution." His confidence came not from faith in his son, but in his ability to spin any failure into someone else's downfall. The exam began. Ryan bent over his paper, heart racing. The first question blurred before his eyes, panic clawing at his chest. His old instincts screamed that he was going to fail again. Then Maya's words surfaced. Breathe, one step at a time. He inhaled slowly, exhaled, and started writing. Minutes turned into hours. Around him, other students scribbled furiously. But Ryan kept steady, moving from one problem to the next. He stumbled once, froze at a complex essay prompt, but remembered Maya's steady voice. Start anywhere. Everyone understands something. He began with what he knew, building piece by piece until the essay took shape. Outside, Maya polished the banisters, ears tuned to the silence of concentration within. She knew this test wasn't just about knowledge. It was about whether Ryan believed he could survive it. And belief was the one thing she had given him. When the final bell rang, students poured out, groaning or sighing in relief. Ryan emerged last, sweat dampening his collar, but his eyes carried a quiet fire. He spotted Maya in the hall and gave the faintest nod. She didn't smile, but her chest swelled with pride. Later that week, the results were posted. Students crowded around the board, chattering. Ethan strode through the throng, his presence parting them like water. Ryan approached more slowly, anxiety gnawing at him. Maya, sweeping nearby, kept her eyes on the floor, but her ears strained for the verdict. The headmaster cleared his throat. "Ryan Caldwell," he announced, voice carrying across the courtyard. "Top quarter of his class." Gasps rippled through the students. Ryan froze, eyes wide. He wasn't just passing, he was excelling. Ethan blinked in disbelief. "Top quarter," he repeated, as though the words were foreign. Then, recovering, he forced a laugh. "Of course. My tutors are the best money can buy." But Ryan's gaze was already on Maya, and Maya's steady look told him the truth. This wasn't money. This was work, belief, resilience. The whispers began at once. "Did you hear? The janitor helped him? No way. He was failing everything." "It makes sense. She's always around." The rumors swelled into certainty. By the end of the day, half the academy knew Ryan Caldwell's turnaround wasn't purchased with his father's fortune. It was built in silence, by a woman with bleach-stained sleeves and a past no one had cared to ask about. That evening, Ethan cornered Ryan outside the school. "Whatever they're saying, you deny it," he ordered, his voice sharp. "Do you hear me? You tell them it was the tutors." That's the only acceptable story. Ryan hesitated, his throat dry. The old fear clawed at him, but Maya's words pressed into his chest like armor. "I can't," he said softly. Ethan's eyes narrowed dangerously. "You can, and you will. Do you understand what's at stake? My name, our name, cannot be tied to a janitor." Ryan lifted his chin. "Then maybe it's not your name that matters." For the first time, Ethan faltered, his son's defiance slicing through his certainty. He reached for control, but the boy who once cowered under his voice was slipping beyond his grasp. Maya watched from a distance, unseen but present. She had known the day would come when Ryan had to face his father alone. And now, seeing him stand taller, she realized the victory wasn't just in test scores. It was in the strength he was beginning to claim. Still, the battle wasn't over. Ethan's pride was wounded, and men like him didn't retreat easily. His fury simmered, promising consequences. But Maya's hidden truth remained unspoken, her real weapon waiting for the right moment. The janitor mask was cracking. Soon, Ethan Caldwell would learn exactly who he had underestimated. Ethan Caldwell's pride boiled like acid in his veins. His son had dared to defy him, dared to give credit to someone beneath their station. The whispers circling the academy only deepened the humiliation. Every corner of the school buzzed with the same rumor. The janitor had done what his money could not. For Ethan, it wasn't just about Ryan anymore. It was about control, reputation, and power. Maya felt the shift immediately. Students glanced her way with a new awareness, teachers with suspicion. She carried her mop bucket through the halls as if nothing had changed. But inside, she knew the fragile balance had shattered. The truth was inching closer to the surface, and Ethan was sharpening his knives. The headmaster called a sudden assembly, claiming it was to celebrate academic achievements. Parents filled the auditorium, their perfumes and colognes mixing with the polish of mahogany seats. Ethan sat in the front row, his tailored suit flawless, his smile tight and cold. Ryan sat beside him, shoulders rigid, while Maya stood at the back, blending into the shadows with the other staff. The headmaster's speech was filled with numbers and names, but the tension built with every word. When he announced Ryan's dramatic turnaround, applause filled the hall. Ethan rose halfway, clapping loudly, his voice booming. "Proof that Caldwell determination prevails!" The crowd chuckled politely. But Ryan's face burned with shame. He knew the truth. So did Maya. Afterward, in the bustling lobby, Ethan cornered the headmaster and several teachers. "This nonsense about a janitor interfering has to stop," he barked. "She's an employee, nothing more. Do I need to remind you who keeps this academy funded?" His words carried, loud enough for everyone to hear. Maya stepped forward before she could stop herself. "It isn't nonsense," she said, her voice calm but steady. Heads turned, the teachers stiffened, parents whispered, and Ryan froze. Ethan's smile was sharp as glass. "Careful," he warned. "You're standing on ground you don't belong on." But Maya didn't back down. Her hands were raw from years of scrubbing. Her uniform smelled of bleach. But her eyes met his with unshaken resolve. "Your son did the work. I only reminded him he was capable." The crowd stirred. A teacher murmured, "So it's true." Another whispered, "She taught him?" The weight of public attention pressed in, suffocating Ethan's control. His voice rose, sharp with anger. "She's manipulating him, filling his head with lies. Do you know who she is? A janitor? A nobody." Ryan stepped forward suddenly, his voice cracking as it cut through the noise. "She's not a nobody. She's the only reason I passed." Gasps rippled across the lobby. Parents leaned in. Students exchanged shocked glances. For the first time, Ethan looked genuinely rattled. His son, his heir, had just chosen a side, and it wasn't his. Maya's heart pounded. She had never intended for the reveal to come like this. Raw and public, but it was no longer avoidable. She drew in a breath. "I wasn't always a janitor," she said, her voice carrying across the marble floors. "I was a teacher once, an award-winning one. I left that life when tragedy forced me to choose survival over prestige. But I never lost what I know. And your son needed someone who could see him, not his last name. The lobby fell into stunned silence. Ethan's face darkened, fury radiating off him. You dare lecture me in front of my peers? You think anyone cares about your sob story? But the tide was already shifting. Parents who once nodded deferentially at Ethan were now watching him with unease. Teachers glanced at Maya with a mixture of awe and guilt. The whispers grew louder. She was a teacher? That explains it. No wonder he improved. Ryan's voice rang out again, stronger this time. You never saw me, Dad. You never even tried. She did. She believed in me when you wouldn't, Ethan's jaw clenched. But he could feel the crowd slipping away from his grip. His image, carefully polished like his shoes and watch, was cracking in front of witnesses. Maya placed a steady hand on Ryan's shoulder. Her voice dropped, but the room carried it. This isn't about money or status. It's about a child who needed hope, and hope doesn't come with a price tag. The headmaster cleared his throat nervously, sensing where the momentum was heading. Perhaps it's time we acknowledge what's clear. Ryan's progress speaks for itself. And Mrs. Torres? Maya, she corrected softly. Maya deserves recognition for her role. Applause broke out hesitantly, then louder as parents joined in. Ethan stood frozen, his empire of arrogance collapsing under the weight of public truth. He had tried to silence her with humiliation. But now the very people whose respect he craved were clapping for the janitor he despised. Maya's chest rose with quiet triumph. This wasn't the end of the battle, but the reversal had begun. Ethan Caldwell had underestimated her, and the entire academy had witnessed it. The sound of applause still echoed through the lobby when Ethan Caldwell's voice cracked like a whip. Enough, he roared, his face flushed with fury. You're all being fooled by a woman who cleans floors for a living. This is my son, my name, my legacy, and I won't have it tarnished by some sob story. But the clapping didn't stop. Parents exchanged glances. Whispers ran like fire through the crowd. Some looked at Maya with admiration, others with discomfort at their own silence in the past. For the first time, Ethan's voice wasn't enough to silence a room. Ryan stood beside Maya, his back straight, his face pale but resolute. He swallowed hard, then raised his voice. You don't get it, Dad. This isn't about you. It's about me. And she's the only one who ever treated me like I mattered. The words landed heavy, raw and unpolished. The crowd hushed, listening. Ethan's jaw tightened, his eyes blazing. You think this woman, knows more than I do about what matters? Maya's voice cut through the air, calm but unshakable. I don't pretend to know more about wealth or power, but I know children. I know learning, and I know what it takes to reach someone everyone else has given up on. The headmaster shifted uncomfortably, then stepped forward. Mr. Caldwell, with respect, Ryan's results are undeniable. If Miss Torres has been guiding him, then she's demonstrated a gift this academy should value, not dismiss. The murmurs swelled louder. One parent spoke up, voice clear and steady. I'd like someone like her helping my child. Results don't lie. Another chimed in. Perhaps money isn't the only answer after all. Ethan's eyes darted across the room. Realizing control was slipping, he slammed his hand against the nearest table. You people are blind. She's nothing. And I will not stand here and let her humiliate me. Maya inhaled deeply, her hand resting lightly on Ryan's shoulder. She had held back long enough. Her eyes swept the crowd, her voice steady. You want to know who I am? Fine. Years ago, I was a teacher. Not just any teacher. I built programs for struggling students. I won awards for academic innovation. I left it all when my husband died, and survival meant taking the first job I could find. That's why I clean floors now. But I never stopped being a teacher. I never stopped knowing how to reach a child who's drowning. Gasps rippled through the lobby. A teacher at the back whispered, "I remember her name. She published articles once parents leaned closer, murmuring about her credentials, her sacrifices. The truth wasn't just rumor anymore. It was revelation." Ryan lifted his chin higher, his voice steadier than before. "She saved me. Not your tutors, not your money, her." The applause started again, louder, firmer, this time from both parents and students. Ethan's face drained of color, his grip on dominance crumbling with every clap that echoed against the marble. He turned on Ryan, his voice dropping into a dangerous growl. "You're embarrassing me." In front of everyone, Ryan's throat bobbed, but he didn't look away. "Maybe for once, it's not about you." The words silenced even the applause. For a moment, nobody moved. Then slowly, students began nodding, parents whispering approval, teachers glancing at one another with something like respect. Ethan stepped back, his polished image unraveling thread by thread. He wanted to shout, to crush the defiance before it spread. But the room wasn't his anymore. Every eye had turned against him. Maya's voice came again, quiet but powerful. "This was never about humiliating you. It was about giving your son a chance, something you never saw he needed." The crowd's reaction was unmistakable. A wave of agreement rippled outward, people murmuring words like brave, honest, right. For the first time, Ethan Caldwell stood in public not as a titan to be obeyed, but as a man whose arrogance had left him exposed. The headmaster raised his voice to cut through the tension. "Ryan Caldwell's turnaround is remarkable, and it stands as proof that sometimes the best teachers aren't the ones we expect. Miss Torres, you have our respect." The applause that followed was thunderous. Students stomped their feet, parents clapped hard enough to sting their palms, teachers nodded with solemn acknowledgement. In the sea of approval, Ethan Caldwell's fury looked small, pitiful even. Ryan turned to Maya, his eyes shining. "They see it now," he whispered. Maya nodded, her heart swelling with both pride and sorrow. The fight had taken everything from her, but at last, dignity had been restored. Not just for her, but for the boy who had needed it most. Ethan stormed out of the lobby, his shoes striking the marble like gunfire. He didn't look back, but Maya knew this wasn't over. His pride would not let the wound heal so easily. Still, for the first time, the crowd had chosen truth over power. And that truth stood beside her, no longer a failing boy, but a young man ready to claim his own worth. The lobby quieted after Ethan's dramatic exit, but the energy of the crowd lingered. Parents were still whispering, students buzzing with disbelief, teachers exchanging glances that carried both shock and respect. Maya stood in the center of it all, the mop bucket still at her side. Yet she felt taller than she had in years. For the first time since tragedy had pulled her life apart, she wasn't invisible. Ryan turned to her, his voice unsteady but proud. "You changed everything. I don't know how to thank you. You did the work," Maya said softly. "I just reminded you that you could." The headmaster stepped forward, clearing his throat. "Miss Torres." "Maya," he said, using her name with newfound weight. "Your guidance clearly saved this student. If you're willing, I'd like to discuss a formal role here. Something beyond janitorial duties." His words drew nods and murmurs of approval from the parents nearby. Maya felt her throat tighten. She hadn't expected this. She had never dared to. But before she could answer, Ryan spoke again, his voice carrying to the crowd. "She deserves it. She's not just a janitor. She's the best teacher I've ever had." Applause broke out again. Not hesitant this time, but strong and sure. Parents clapped, teachers nodded, even students joined in. The tide had fully turned. The humiliation Ethan had tried to pin on her had inverted, transforming into vindication before dozens of witnesses. Maya caught sight of Sophie at the back of the crowd, clutching her drawing in both hands. Her daughter's eyes were shining, her smile wide. Maya's chest swelled with pride that eclipsed every scar she carried. Sophie wasn't just seeing her mother survive anymore, she was seeing her triumph. But Maya's victory was not about a job title or recognition. It was about proving that dignity could not be stripped away by arrogance, that belief mattered more than wealth, and that even the smallest voices could change lives. Outside, Ethan's black luxury car idled by the curb. Through the glass doors, Maya saw him pacing, phone pressed to his ear, anger still radiating off him. She knew he wouldn't surrender gracefully. Men like him never did. But his voice had lost its power inside those walls. He could rage, he could scheme, but the truth had already rooted itself in too many minds to be erased. The headmaster extended his hand. Maya, we'll speak more tomorrow. Tonight, go home to your daughter. Rest. You've earned it. Maya shook his hand, then placed her palm lightly on Ryan's shoulder. Keep fighting, she whispered. I will, Ryan promised, his voice steady now. That night, Maya walked home with Sophie at her side. The city lights shimmered off wet pavement. Buses roared past, and Maya carried nothing but her daughter's hand in her own. The janitor's uniform still clung to her. But tonight, it didn't feel like a mark of shame. It felt like armor she had worn through battle and never once abandoned. At home, Sophie held up her drawing again. See, Mama, I told you. You're a teacher. Maya hugged her tightly, tears slipping down her cheeks. Yes, sweetheart. And I always will be, Ez. Sophie drifted to sleep. Maya sat quietly by the window, staring out at the city's skyline. Tomorrow would bring new battles. Ethan's fury, the academy's decisions, the whispers of people who didn't understand. But she wasn't afraid anymore. She had reclaimed her voice, and with it, her dignity. The story wasn't just about her. It was about every overlooked worker, every dismissed parent, every underestimated soul who carried greatness inside them. Maya knew this victory would ripple further than she could imagine. And for Ryan, it was just the beginning. He had learned the one secret that money couldn't buy: belief. A seed planted by someone the world had tried to erase, now growing stronger every day. If you followed this far, ask yourself, what injustice should we tackle next? Because there will always be another story where someone underestimated rises, where silence becomes strength, and where hope refuses to die. Subscribe and don't miss our next story. Trust me, you'll feel it. And tell me in the comments, what injustice should we tackle next?